Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for our NICER programme Handbook for the Circular Economy book launch webinar. It's great that so many people of you could come along. Hopefully there's going to be a few more people joining as we move on. But I'm Alan Alexander. I'm from the University of Exeter Business School. I'm based in, I'd say, sunny Cornwall, but we haven't seen the sun in days and it's been pouring with rain. But I'm a professor of innovation and circular economy and one of the editors of the book that we're going to talk about today. I think there's another slide to come in any second. There we go. So a little bit of housekeeping. As always, the webinar's recorded and it'll be made available for you to watch again and again and again and again, if you so wish, on the CE Hub website. If you don't wish to appear on the recording, then please keep your camera off. I'd request that you keep your microphones muted while the speakers are presenting. And there will be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end once the speakers have presented their content. Next slide, please. So as I said, the webinar today is about the Handbook for the Circular Economy, which we have been delighted to have published earlier on this year. When we were conceiving the idea of the handbook, myself, Fiona Charnley and Stefano Pascucci, we were trying to think about how we could do something a little bit different. And so hopefully what you're going to learn today is that we have done something a little bit different. The book fits in, the book is essentially in three parts. And the first part, rather than present content that you would normally see from world-leading experts and thought leaders in the subject, what we've done is we've interviewed them and we've created some transcripts. The aim of this is to try and catch them telling us the things that they're really thinking about currently, rather than presenting to us the content that they've researched and defended and had published previously. So hopefully if you get an opportunity to pick up part one, you'll see that there's some opinions from some really interesting thought leaders. And then in part two, we have perhaps what you'd expect in terms of a handbook, some chapters from authors who are doing empirical work from all around the world, who are trying to bring forward some different concepts, different perspectives on circularity. So we've got three of those authors today on our webcast. We've got Saskia van der Musenberg, who's going to talk to us about her chapter on biomimicry. We've got Marta Ferry from Lancaster University, and she's going to talk about her chapter on plastics. And then we've got Mariana Novak, who works at Circular Economy, and she's going to talk about her chapter on the job and the employment market around circular economy. So I won't take up any more of your time. I'm going to pop up every now and again to move from one speaker to the next, and I am going to be chairing the Q&A at the end. So I'd like to hand over to Saskia. Saskia is the director and co-founder of Biomimicry in the Netherlands. She's a certified biomimicry professional with 25 years experience in strategic innovation, biomimicry, change management and marketing. Saskia, whenever you're ready.
I think, sorry to interrupt, I think Saskia's just having a little bit of trouble joining, so we might want to go to Marta first and come back to Saskia. Sorry about that.
No worries. I thought she was in
the background
okay.
To get her sorted.
So instead of Saskia, we're going to hear from Marta. Let me tell you a little bit about Marta. He says, quickly grabbing her bio. Marta's a doctoral researcher in organisation work and technology at Lancaster University Management School. And she's going to look at her focus on single-use plastics and the interaction with circular economy. Marta.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. So today I'm presenting my chapter also on behalf of my co-author, Alison Stowell and Gail Whitman. So our argument is about single-use plastics and the circular economy invoked as a solution to tackle the plastic crisis. So single-use plastic waste are seen as a matter out of place as future pollution. So the focus is on their material composition. They leak into the natural environment, remain and accumulate because it does not degrade and therefore pollute. Business-driven organization invokes circular economist ideas to put these materials back in place. And we use the International Alliance for Sustainable Business, IASB, case to show the process of contexting, which is the dynamics between contexts. So contexts are enacted by the interrelations between organizations' agendas, social values, and plastic material compositions, material values, to understand how circular solutions get organized and what notions of responsibility these solutions enact. So considering how and who invokes various contexts illuminates the process that makes certain solution to the plastic crisis prevalent. And the context in activity could be seen as a political activity. So the ISB case is based on a 6-month actor network theory ethnography. ISB is a member-based global business-driven alliance with a large membership of organizations from diverse sectors, among which the plastic one. Plastic members are manufacturers, retailers, consumer goods companies, and recyclers, all dealing with single-use plastic. ISB designed a circular economy agenda that focuses on 8 critical materials, among which plastic, and it is inspired by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation circular economy philosophy. The agenda was designed by the Circular Economy Program at ISB. The circular economy practices related to plastics and presented as part of the ISB agenda are brought by plastic members that support and help designing the agenda. So their understanding of circular economy comes from their sustainability records and mostly relates to technocentric practices such as reusing and recycling. I got access to do this research working as an unpaid intern at the Plastic and Packaging team, the PPT, that was set up by the Circular Economy Program at IASB. Their goal was to organize a circular economy project to help plastic members. Okay, so originally the chapter presents 2 vignettes. I'm here presenting the second one for time consideration, which is the Sustainable Organization Forum. So this is an event organized by the no-profit Green Organizing and run for 3 days in a location in Europe. It gathered about 80 actors, such as practitioners, academics, NGOs of various types, and policymakers, all working on single-use plastics and the circular economy. So the forum vignette is an example of the process of invoking contexts depending on actors, materials, objects, and issues that they all interrelate. And the vignette focuses on a particular activity called the round table exercise, which shows the contexting activities and help us understand who invokes certain circular solution and how one of these solutions became predominant over the others. So the table in the slide represents a simplified version of the contexting process within this vignette. There were 3 main circular economy contexts invoked. The 2 of them are quite similar. So the reason for divided them is to show the circular economy, ISB circular economy for plastics context. Which focused on ideas of circular economy as reusability and recyclability, and obviously was invoked by the Plastic and Packaging team director that was representing ISB at the event. The other context similar to this one was called New Life to Plastics, and it is a positive view of plastics. So they're materials that just need to be put back in place through reusing and recycling. And this context was invoked by various organizations sitting at the table, like the policymaker, one of the 2 environmental NGOs, and plastic recyclers and producers. So the social values performed by these organizations are similar and could be summarized as this organization wanted to promote their practices around plastics, so reusing and recycling. The material values here relate to single-use plastics physical characteristic, considered as difficult because plastics are not easy to reuse and recycle. Also, the notions of in place and responsibility are similar. So plastics are considered in place when reusable and recycled, it's no surprise. And responsibility primarily focus on consumers are responsible for the fate of plastics, and then on businesses and policymakers that have to create a situation where single-use plastics can be recycled and reused. So the third context invoked is called the no plastic context, and it is a very negative judgment of these materials. They're not considered redeemable, and the context was invoked by one of the two environmental NGOs and the Waste Speaker Association representatives sitting at the table. Their social values relate to the reduction and elimination of single-use plastics, and the material values performing with that, similar to the previous one. So we have single-use plastics, physical characteristics that make this material difficult to deal with because they leak and pollute the natural environment. So the notions of indiscipline and responsibility in this case are different because plastic is never in place, and responsibility is on consumers, but also plastic producers. They are considered accountable for the plastic crisis. So through 2 hours conversations and various negotiations between these two contexts and interrelations of the various social values and material values that we saw, the new life to plastics context become the predominant circular economy context. So the organization that invoked such a context focused on the pervasiveness of plastic waste as the ocean and land pollution. So that was the reason why single-use plastic were considered out of place. So plastic waste was disrupted by simply being there. The problem was that these materials did not degrade and accumulate and therefore polluted, and the presence of unwanted post-consumption plastics in waters and on land was perceived as a problem to be solved as soon as possible. This means the solutions such as deposit scheme, the creation of recycling infrastructures, and trash art were likely to be considered as the scene to address the immediate problem. So context could be considered political, therefore the context in activity is a political activity, and there are some considerations regarding responsibility as well. So circular economy context we saw come attached with a certain notion of plastic waste as in and out of place and responsibility, how and what actors invoked various contexts illuminate the process in which circular solutions are enacted and become prevalent. Organizations invoke circular economy contexts that are already supportive of their social values. These may lead to the reproduction of existing practices, such as recycling, that did not prevent the plastic crisis in the first instance. In circular economy context, activity enact a predominant idea of responsibility, that it is not only attached to a certain context, but also to a certain understanding of future plastic waste as in place. Finally, the circular economy context in activity can be considered as a political activity because it is based on organizations' interest around single-use plastic. And a few lessons learned, and I conclude with this one, to consider members' agendas and interests to understand their definition of the circular economy should be a priority for business-driven alliances such as ISB, because business organization perception of single-use plastics as positive material can lead to the reproduction of existing practices that we saw that do not necessarily support innovation. Recognizing that members might mobilize practices that tend to preserve their approach to single-use plastic could help alliances identify existing patterns and manage the influence of the members on projects. And finally, considering the role of context in activities in designing circular solutions could drive business-driven organization to help members transition to a circular economy. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Marta, and thank you for stepping in into the breach. As I said to the people at the beginning, there'll be opportunity to ask Marta questions in the Q&A. Imogen, have we got Saskia in yet? I can't see her on the list.
Yeah, I think maybe if we go to Mariana next, if she's back in.
Okay, so we'll hear from Mariana next. It almost makes it look like I know what's going on, doesn't it? we'll hear from Mariana next. She's the lead of Circularity Gap Reporting, the Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative at Circular Economy in the Netherlands. She joined Circular Economy in 2018, and previously she led a data team elsewhere. She's going to talk to us today about circular economy jobs and employment. So, Mariana, over to you.
I think she may have left and then was trying to come back in. Apologies for this. I will find out where she is.
Okay. So in the gap, perhaps let me tell you about some of the chapters that we have in the book or some of the authors that we have in part 1. So in part 1, as I said to you earlier on, we've collected some thought leaders and we've interviewed them to try and get their latest thoughts. And we hear from Walter Starhol. And really, one of the important things he brings forward is the idea of the idea of taxing labour and taxing products in a completely different way in order to achieve a step change in circularity. Ken Webster presents us with some content around the framing of circular economy, and those of you that have been studying circular economy for a number of years will be very familiar with Ken. He brings some really interesting perspectives on maybe 21st century framing. We have Kate Rayworth. Kate Rayworth presents content akin to her donut economics work, but tailors it towards circular economy. We hear from Frances Wall. Frances has spent her life looking at mineral and minings, and particularly mining of precious metals, and she comments on the potential for circularity to go worldwide in terms of our resources in minerals and mining. We hear from Hugo Spowers. Hugo is a revolutionary. He's trying to take on the dominant trajectory of the automobile industry by bringing forwards a circular economy company that brings forwards a circular economy car, and that circular economy car takes its power from hydrogen and is a lightweight city car. Then we hear from Andy Rees. Andy Rees was given an OBE by the Queen for his services in waste management, and we look at the waste, reuse, recycling, and how Andy, through his work with the Welsh Assembly and the Welsh Government, has brought about a positive approach to the governance of waste. And then finally, we hear from Ladea Godina Kosia, who's based in Slovenia, and she leads an organisation called Circular Change, and is also the chair of the EU circular economy stakeholder platform. And she talks about the power of people and how we mobilise people at an individual level to bring forwards the idea of circularity. That was my brief segue through part 1, and I'm kind of hoping we might have Mariana back in now.
Massive apologies. There seems to be a bit of a tech issue in the background. I think she's out. They're both on their way now.
Okay.
So 1 more minute and we should be good.
Here we go. I can see Mariana and I can see Saskia. Which one of you would like to go next?
Oh, thank you for keeping trying.
Okay. Well, let's hear from Saskia first, just because she's at the top of my list. Saskia, as a director and the co-founder of Biomimicry in the Netherlands, is going to talk to us for about 10 minutes about the chapter that she wrote in part 2 of our book on biomimicry. So Saskia, the floor's yours.
Thank you. Let me see, where are you? I have so many screens open now. I'd like to share some slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Do you already see something?
We can see the slide background, but there we go. Now, if you make it full screen, perfect.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, so my pleasure to share a bit more about a chapter I wrote of course, I can't go into everything. For that, you have to read it. Maybe you already did. And otherwise, I'm hoping that after this presentation, you will get into it. So I was invited to talk about biomimicry and the circular economy. I've been working myself in the field of biomimicry now since 2010. And for those who may be still not know what biomimicry is, it comes from those Greek words bios and mimesis. So very simply put, it is, we know bios from biology, meaning life, and mimesis is something like to imitate or to copy, to follow. So very simply put, we are trying to copy or imitate or act as the rest of the natural world is doing. And so people who are in the field of biomimicry may look at nature a bit different than most people. Of course, it's a very beautiful decor and lovely to walk and cycle and whatever you like to do in there. But we also look at it as the most advanced R&D lab, research and development lab that is out there. So in my opinion, what you see up here are the ultimate scientists and architects and maybe chemists who have been practicing sustainable and regenerative practices over 3.8 billion years that there's life on this planet. And how different is that from our ways of doing? I think we are the only organism that is actually fouling its own nest. And of course, this is greatly because of our linear ways of working. And where everything we mine, lots of stuff end up in these piles of waste. And that's why every time I maybe read in the newspaper, if they start talking about the economy, I especially feel this sort of slightly panic if it says the economy is growing. Because if our linear economy is growing, then we keep getting these bigger piles of waste all the time. So can that be done differently? Yes. I think if we would do more biomimicry, and maybe a more formal definition of the field is to consciously try to emulate the best strategies in nature. And there's already lots of examples. I won't go too much into that. Here you see 3 of them. There's already buildings that are inspired after how termites are able to ventilate their termite nests. We have wind turbines that mimicked the wings of it's not really the wings, but the bumps on the on these big I can't come up with the English word now, but you know what I mean, which helps them to lift and reduce drag. And those wind turbines are very efficient in areas with less wind speed. And of course, there's many scientists that are trying to mimic leaves and how they photosynthesize for better solar panels. And biomimicry is one of the schools of thought for the circular economy, especially if you start looking at biomimicry from a systems perspective, because in nature there is no waste. Some trees, even if after they die, they still contribute to their environment. Some trees even 5 times longer than the time they did while they were alive. So if there's no waste there and we are nature too, can we also do it? So this inspired, of course, largely the circular economy. And one of the points I'm making in my chapter, I think at the moment we are very much focusing on closing these loops, and maybe especially on the technical side, and try to minimize this lost matter and heat that comes out of it. I think if we want to be truly regenerative, we also should move from more technical to biological loops, because then we start interacting with the rest of the kingdoms, the natural kingdoms, and can be truly be regenerative. And there's many examples, biomimicry examples out there that are trying to do that. I also wanted to point out a couple of, the essential elements of biomimicry, because it's not just doing biomimicry for the sake of doing it. We look at both ethos. Why do you want to do it in the first place? We also think it's very important to reconnect ourselves with the rest of nature again. And emulate is more the innovation piece of doing biomimicry. So if we start thinking about why do we want to do this in the first place, and I think there's also overlap with the circular economy, it is we do have this deep desire to fit in on Earth. Right now, I see the human species not so well adapted to the planetary boundaries. And so we can learn from all the other organisms that have been here for millions of years how to become good Earthlings. And this is also that whenever you want to learn from nature, because, well, nature, there is some people have a very romantic view of it, but there can be really harsh and terrible things that are happening in nature as well. So we need to bring in our own ethos for why we want to do biomimicry with what end result, because you could probably also learn from nature to create mass destruction weapons or something. The reconnect is very much the understanding or the mindset with what you're doing. And right now I'm calling in from the Netherlands. It's a pretty cold day. And if you start thinking about how do all the other organisms keep themselves warm, if you start thinking about the same needs and wants and how clever sometimes they are doing it, you get much more respect. And also if you start understanding that you're part of that bigger cycle, that is, I think, helping as well. So to realign and become a member again of that natural world. So let's not forget that we are nature too. And that translates in how some people think that all our products and our economy is sort of separated from that larger natural environment. And I'm making a point in the chapter about it as well. But actually, our economy is embedded in this social, in our societal systems, and then again in the larger biosphere. So if we harm stuff in the green part, it will come back as a boomerang also into our society and economy. And then the final part in biomimicry is really the emulation. It's the action of doing biomimicry. It's the bio-inspired innovation. But if you do that without the ethos and maybe the reconnect side, it is, we call it bio-inspiration and not so much biomimicry. Here you see the example of spider web. Spider silk is, if you would compare it ounce per ounce, 5 times stronger than steel, but it is made from chopped up flies inside the stomach of a spider, and the spider web can be eaten again. So it's completely, fitting very well in the circular economy system. Whereas these steel fibers, they come about with lots of energy and sometimes nasty chemicals. Yeah, so here you see again how the difference in the temperature that is required to make it. I also talk in the chapter about not only using nature as a model for innovation, but also as a benchmark for business output. And this is something I'm currently working in practice a lot about, and I thought it would be good to take you through this case. Interface is making carpet tiles for a long time. They've been active to transition to a more circular model. In the mid-90s, they were still very fossil fuel based, and by 2020, they were able to have no negative impact, but for them, that was only the starting point to start acting to become having a positive impact. And the thinking behind it, maybe thinking about time, maybe we should, thinking about this, they used biomimicry for some product innovations. The first thing was they looked at how a forest floor looks like in fall, and they translated that to this sort of random design in the carpet tiles. Until then, all carpet tiles had to be exactly the same color. It was much harder to have the same color with these different, if you have to dye them. But now there were no production mistakes. It was easy to cut them. It didn't matter how you would lay them. So it was a big success, and customers liked it as well. And then the next thing they did, carpet tiles had to be glued to the floor, which made it really hard to recycle them. And they had a big take-back program. So they asked nature again, how does nature hold something together or hold it on the floor? And they had to think about the geckos who, seemingly glue themselves to the wall and the ceilings. And they created these, they are postage size tactiles, which have the same properties as gecko feet. And you can put 4 corners of 4 carpet tiles on this little tactile, and then gravity holds everything on the floor, learning from how nature and physics work. So that helped a lot with the recycling, taking back programs. But they also learned in the meantime that nature works with what is available in abundance and local. And unfortunately, what we have in abundance is lots of sunken fishing nets that are damaging the ocean floor. But now Interface works with fishermen from the Philippines who cannot fish on fish anymore because of overfishing regulation. But these fishermen now fish for these sunken fishing nets, cleaning up the ocean floor and making an income, and the nylon can be reused in the carpet tiles. Well, the next generation of carpet tile that is out there now is storing more CO2 than it's emitting during the manufacturing process, because they're using much more biological stuff. And their next big Apollo project is to create a factory that functions like a forest. And this is sort of the last thing I would like to add to the presentation. The thinking is that ecosystems are very generous. They deliver all sorts of ecosystem services, and they ask themselves, can our factory not do the same? And can buildings and schools and cities not do the same? Anything that is place-based. And yes, so we can. There's now a method, an approach that is looking at natural ecosystems and quantifying what it is doing in terms like what you see here, maybe in how in water filtration or air purification, but also how much biodiversity and CO2 is stored. And in this approach, where so the Interface has a factory in the Netherlands, Australia, and the US, and we're about to start in the Netherlands. We identified now a local reference ecosystem. We quantified what that ecosystem is doing, and that becomes a benchmark for the factory. So next to producing carpet tiles, they also want to produce the same amount of clean air and carbon storage as the natural ecosystem would have done if that was still there. And then we start coming up with design interventions inspired by nature and implement those. So this is all part of Project Positive. There's some big names out there. You can read lots of it online.
Thank you, Saskia.
Yeah,
brilliant.
That's about it, I think.
That's fantastic. I could listen to this all day, but we do need to move on. But thank you very much.
Thank you for interrupting.
Mariana, I did introduce you earlier on, but you weren't online. So it's back over to you now to learn about employment and jobs in the circular economy. Thank you, Mariana.
Great, thank you so much. It's a little bit of a shift now into more like the monitoring and analytical world of the circular economy. So after such nice examples about nature and working with nature, we're now going to have a little mental shift, a bit more into the numbers. So I am here also on behalf of my co-authors. We wrote a chapter about monitoring circular jobs. And we did that together at Circle Economy with Esther Goodwin-Brown and also some folks over at UNEP who work a lot on understanding the labor market in cities and how the circular economy will and circular transition will affect the labor market. So in the chapter, what we did was look at some case studies. We used a methodology that we developed to crunch the numbers and see, what are the circular jobs in a couple of cities, and we compared and interpreted them, and that's what's in the chapter. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was a bit beyond that, and also how the methodology and the program has evolved since that time. So I'm going to share my screen, but I'm also going to drop a link in the chat of what I am going to share. And basically it's a monitor. So what we've done is built a circular jobs monitor where we are trying to just expose the number of people working on circular economy around the world. It's not everywhere yet. We're working on our global numbers, but we're trying to calculate this number at different city levels, at country levels, and regional levels, and use that as a way to inform policy making, to understand where is the current activity of circular economy. So there are a lot of things on there, a lot of cities and territories. I will just share, I suppose I should just share if I can share the window. Oh yeah, great. Cool. So we're all together, right, in this window with the monitor. Okay, so I'll briefly give an overview of the methodology, but for those who are interested in the more technical components, you can find all the links on this website, and we also cover it in the chapter. And then I'll look at a couple of example cities and talk more about how we can interpret the numbers. So first of all, the method. Now, a lot of statistical officers and some researchers are trying to quantify this circular economy and people working in the circular economy. And typically there's a very narrow focus on just, people working in recycling. So people working in repair, people working in recycling, done. We've counted everybody who's working on it. And well, we had the idea that there was actually more to it than that. So we wanted to look at understanding all the indirect effects in the labor market, but also we tried to understand sectors that were enabling the circular economy beyond these repair and recycling jobs. So what I would like to see now is whether you can still see I'm not sure what you can see. That's a problem.
So we can see a screen with 5 black boxes: circular economy
Great.
elements, strategies for resource recycling.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. All right. So typically what's most common is this 10R framework where people break down these circular strategies and, talk about their effects. And we've mapped this a bit here to some other common frameworks that are used. And what we did at Circle Economy some time ago is then create yet another framework, which encompasses the 10 Rs through these elements around what are called these key core elements over here. And that encompasses all your typical circular economy jobs. So working in repair, working in recycling, working in recovery or remanufacturing, etc. But we went on to understand which other sectors were enabling the circular economy. In other words, which other sectors were removing barriers to circular activities. And we came up with these 5 elements which relate to specific sectors. So we looked at design activities. So that's, I guess, the biomimicry side of it would be included here. What's happening upstream. We looked at changing business models to really changing incentives around the ownership and management of materials, digital platforms to accelerate sharing or maybe to optimize processes, collaboration activities up and down the supply chain. And developing research and data around the circular economy that also helps to create awareness or break down information barriers. So we included these sectors in our analysis of the circular jobs. And that's quite unique because typically the jobs are just related to recycling. So we have a kind of like bigger number of circular jobs. Okay, so that's the main part of what's important to consider with the methodology. And what we went on to do was, yeah, we worked on gathering all this data and trying to analyze the circular jobs at different levels. So we worked in a couple of countries at the country level. So you can see here, we've got Netherlands 4.8%, Belgium 8.4%, UK 9.7%. And we're going to dig into some of this in a sec. But we also worked with the UNEP program to actually try and collect data and calculate these numbers for all these cities. We aimed for 100 cities around the world, and we got them. So that was cool. And yeah, so we applied this methodology to all these cities. And then if you click around into these cities, you can see, so you have to click this first. You can see a bit of a breakdown at an initial glance, what the profile of circular jobs is in the city according to those elements. Okay, so you do have to know the elements to use this at a glance, but they are easy. So if you do it once or twice, then you'll see them. So here you could see, for instance, in Lusaka, there's a lot of activities in repair. There's not so much going on in these more enabling elements. So that really exposes then an opportunity. There's not so many jobs related to the generation of renewable energy, or at least according to the data that we had. So that's kind of either showing you a data gap or also showing an opportunity. So if you shoot over to another kind of city or profile, you see these pictures of where the circular jobs are quite interesting in the way that they kind of profile the city in terms of its circular activity. So here we've got a lot of digital activity supporting circular economy, and again, a lot of repair, but not so many other activities, not even, for instance, recycling. Let's look at another nice dark blue one, because again, that one looks crazy. So it's just, again, like the similar profile of repair to digital, but now with a bit of the recycling. So yeah, so it's quite interesting to go through these different cities and see what it means and try to think about like what that means relative to the local economy and how then the circular transition will affect the different sectors. So I wanted to zoom in a bit here before we deep dive into the numbers, just make it relevant. So let's see. I think a lot of folks are in Exeter, maybe you're just in the surrounds. You can look at London's profile and see that there's quite a nice shift. And then I don't have Exeter, unfortunately. But if you look nearby to neighboring Cornwall, then we can even just compare London to Cornwall and see the difference here. So in London, again, we've got this nice split with the high digital, but also a lot of the enabling sectors, not so much in the renewable energy sector. But here the profile changes a bit. So Cornwall, you've got a lot more activities, more in these enabling business models, so like rental business models and things like that, and less so in digital technology. So yeah, I was wondering, you know, if that resonated with folks where you guys are at, if that sounds like it's resonates with the way things are working. So I just wanted to also show you that this breaks down. It's not only just the spider chart, and each of these circular jobs can relates to, yes, the elements, but also to the underlying sectors that relate to that. So you can really see the breakdown of, in this case, jobs related to this element, which is largely around repairing and maintaining. There's a lot of activity coming out of manufacturing for this element. Now, there's one other interesting insight that can be drawn from this, which is looking at beyond these more direct circular activities and looking more into the indirect effects. So of course, in order to have, you know, circular products, then you also need to manufacture them and get raw materials for them. So we also just did that analysis, so it's included in this methodology, so that you can see for all the other sectors, what are all the indirect jobs contributing. And this also can become quite insightful, because you can see that even if you have something like renewable energy, then renewable energy actually has quite a high dependence, of course, on the mining of metals. And then that kind of comes up as a prominent sector that's contributing to the circular economy, and it really is food for thought in terms of, we're calling for renewable energy transition. So if we look at the related jobs and hence, impacts related to that sector, we're increasing the amount of critical materials required to make all the renewable energy. So that can be quite an eye-opener to see how is your economy interrelated, and which sectors do you need to kind of consider if you're thinking about one circular strategy, which other sectors are going to be involved too, and what does that mean then for the overall impacts?
Mariana, I don't wish to interrupt. I would like to try and get a couple of questions in if I can.
Yes,
I appreciate we had a little.
Going to wrap up then, because I knew we were over time. So that was where I wanted to stop and just show you a little bit about the methodology and give you access to this link so you can go and explore it for cities that you're interested in, and happy to take any questions or discuss it further.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mariana.
Thank you.
I'll definitely have a look because I live in Cornwall, and so it's super interesting to see the relationship between the jobs that are being consumed in circular economy. We have one question from the floor at the moment, which is for you, Mariana, which is, how do you keep this model up to date? Saskia's keen to find out on its how you keep it current.
Yeah, no worries. So there's two components. The one thing is the methodology, which we continue to work on an ongoing basis. So we did publish the paper about it, and that's done. So there's like that scientific article, but we continue to improve it to make it practical and try and extract recommendations and, take it a bit out of the abstract world. That's just ongoing with our projects. In terms of the data, we do it on an ongoing basis. So when we did this 100 Cities project, we did a mass data collection exercise. So much of the data is outdated. We rely on employment data, and that's, we don't collect or create employment data, but we gather what's there, and a lot of it just isn't available. We even just recently did a global check, and a lot of cities don't even have employment data, which is surprising. Like, you can sometimes only find it at the national level, for instance. We are embarking on a journey with ILO and the World Bank to actually structurally gather and study gather data about and study circular jobs. So we have a small paper about that, which I can share, but it's a work in progress.
Fantastic, thank you. So important, the societal dimension of employment around circular economy. I think we have a question from Tracy, or at least a hand up from Tracy. You're muted, Tracy.
Yeah, it was just with regards to circular economy facts. In York and North Yorkshire region, we're sort of overperform in terms of the circular economy, but I noticed that you've only got sort of Leeds on there, so it's big cities rather than the region itself, the wider region where we do have wind farms, etc., and perhaps more green jobs, but obviously it's not tracking. I think we're about 13% in terms of the research that we've had done.
If we can get the employment data for the region, we'd love to calculate a bit more. And we can do it at any level as long as we have the relevant employment data. So I'm sure that there's a region which has some of the sectors unaccounted for.
Yeah, okay.
Do we have any questions? Oh, here we go. Mark, did you want to ask this one?
Hello. Yeah, I can do. So it's more not so much a question, but just an observation. If you start to look at particularly Northern Europe, UK, there's an enormous amount of circular activity in terms of repair and reuse that isn't a job per se. A lot of it's done through community repair. A lot of it's voluntary, and that it will effectively not be captured in this. I mean, does that have any implications at all? Sort of understating the total effort because it's not a job.
Yeah, it definitely does. We have the same issue with the informal work, not really in Europe as much, but when we work in Latin America and Africa. So when we do this analysis as part of a research piece for typically like government agencies, then we never provide the numbers in standalone. So you have to always have a bit of this, like, you know, corresponding analysis next to it, which says, okay, but in this region, we also have these informal actors. They make up a big, you know, there's some supplementary work to be done, but it's not formally included in this methodology and in this monitor. It's more like when we work in a particular context, it comes up.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any questions that come across for our other presenters today? I'm conscious that if anyone presents a data model, we can obviously find anomalies in there, especially particularly related to cows on the Isle of Wight, where the Isle of Wight is where I come from. So it's a good segue nicely for me from Cornwall to the Isle of Wight, where there doesn't seem to be any circular economy jobs, but the EMF is located. But we won't worry too much about that. Does anyone have any other questions for our other presenters? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands up, and I'm not seeing anything new in the chat. So, Imogen, can we go back to the original slides? And I think Fiona has, or I have something to finish off with. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to all of our speakers. That was really fascinating, and having helped with putting this book together, it's really great to kind of go a bit deeper into each of the chapters, and it really brings it to life, obviously having the presenters themselves talking about each chapter, which is great. So if this has whetted your appetite at all to find out more about the book, then you can purchase it, and the publishers De Gruyter have made a nice Christmas offer in that they have offered a 40% discount for anyone that has attended the webinar. So if you wanted to purchase the book with this discount, you would need to buy it directly from degruyter.com, and then when you check out, you can use this for letter code HBCE when you're checking out, and that will apply a 40% discount to the book. But just wanted to also say that obviously this webinar has been brought to you by the Circular Economy Hub, and we have lots of other resources. We have lots of interviews with various practitioners on the challenges and opportunities from implementing circular economy. We have lots of reports and case studies. So if you want to find out more about any aspect of the circular economy, please do visit us at circulareconomyhub.org, and you can find lots of resources and tools on our website. But I think that's all from me. Back to Alan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the plug. Always good to find out where we can buy it from. I don't need to buy it. I've got a copy here, but I won't hold it up too high in case I drop it on my foot, because it's quite a big book. Thank you very much to our presenters, to Mariana, to Saskia, and to Marta. If nothing else, one of the things I've definitely learned today is that as an owner of an old car, in my old car, there were lots of cobwebs, and had I realised they were edible, I could have solved the question for my young children: is there anything to eat on this long journey? So thank you very much, Saskia. Don't want to trivialise the content. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Wish everybody a fantastic Christmas. Hope to see you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.